It was a bitterly cold morning on March 11, 1987, when Special Agent Daniel Rourke, a 43-year-old veteran of the FBI, walked out of the Washington, D.C. field office and disappeared into thin air. He told no one where he was going, only that he was chasing a lead connected to a case he had been quietly investigating on his own time. He left behind his wallet, apartment keys, and even his lunch on his desk, small details that, at the time, seemed forgettable. But to those who later studied the case, these clues painted the picture of a man who left in a hurry, or under pressure. Rourke had a reputation inside the bureau: sharp, relentless, and a little too curious. Over the past year, his behavior had shifted. He became distant from coworkers, frequently working late, and had reportedly begun requesting access to sealed case files well outside his jurisdiction. His colleagues chalked it up to burnout or personal issues, but Rourke believed he had stumbled onto something larger, something that began with an unsolved 1979 murder in New Jersey and branched into a network of bribed officials, false convictions, and suspicious disappearances of low-level informants. He referred to it cryptically as Operation Dagger. On the day of his disappearance, Rourke was seen on a grainy security camera leaving the office's underground parking lot in his agency-issued black Ford LTD. The timestamp read 9:14 a.m. His final known stop was a gas station just outside Arlington, where he filled up the tank, bought a cup of coffee, and scribbled something into a leather-bound notebook he always carried. The notebook was never found. Hours later, that same Ford was discovered abandoned near a defunct rail yard in southeast D.C., keys still in the ignition, driver's door slightly ajar. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no fingerprints, nothing. The rail yard itself was notorious, an industrial graveyard where junkies, squatters, and the city's shadows lingered. Despite an extensive search by local and federal authorities, no one saw anything. Bloodhounds picked up a faint trail that abruptly ended near a concrete wall. It was as if Rourke had stepped out of his car and vanished into thin air. His cell phone, a bulky agency-issued Motorola at the time, was never located. The official internal report cited unknown disappearance. Presumed foul play, but quietly, agents began whispering another word: inside job. The days turned to weeks, and soon the headlines faded. Rourke's disappearance was labeled a tragic mystery. But his closest allies, including his former partner and his now widowed wife, Eleanor Rourke, remained convinced that Daniel didn't just vanish. He had been silenced. One agent claimed, off the record, that Rourke had mailed a sealed envelope to himself just days before disappearing. But that envelope never arrived. And while the Bureau wanted the story buried, something far more disturbing was just beginning to surface. In the months that followed Rourke's disappearance, the investigation became a tangle of false leads, bureaucratic dead ends, and growing silence. Officially, the FBI launched a multi-agency task force to locate their missing agent, but behind closed doors, priorities shifted quickly. Files related to Operation Dagger were pulled from circulation. Access to Rourke's personal case notes was restricted. Colleagues who had once spoken freely about his theories began to grow silent, some even refusing to acknowledge that he had been investigating anything off the books. It was as if Rourke's entire trail was being slowly erased from within. The media buzzed briefly with speculation. Local papers ran with sensational headlines: FBI agent abducted, mystery at the rail yard. But the coverage dried up just as quickly as it appeared. Internally, whispers began spreading through the Bureau's corridors, not just about Rourke's fate, but about his actions in the months before he vanished. Some suggested he had grown paranoid, possibly unstable. Others claimed he had been compromised, that maybe he had been working with the same criminal elements he claimed to be chasing. One senior agent, requesting anonymity, told a reporter, years later, when someone gets too close to the wrong truth, they don't go missing, they get made to disappear. Even more unsettling was the sudden silence from those closest to him. Eleanor Rourke, once outspoken about her husband's character and dedication, stopped speaking to the press altogether. She sold their Arlington home, left her teaching position, and relocated to an undisclosed location. A former neighbor recalled seeing a black SUV idling in front of the Rourke home the night before Eleanor moved out. No plates, tinted windows. When questioned, the Bureau denied any surveillance activity. But the timing was too eerie to ignore. Eleanor had once told a friend, "Dan said if anything ever happened to him, I shouldn't trust anyone, not even the agency." Internally, low-level agents began to suspect that Rourke's disappearance wasn't being investigated, it was being contained. Files began disappearing from his archive desk. A technician who accessed Rourke's office computer claimed that entire folders had been remotely deleted, weeks after the investigation had supposedly stalled. When he tried to bring this up during an internal briefing, he was reassigned to a desk job in Alaska within days. By the end of 1988, every single member of the task force created to investigate Rourke had either transferred, retired early, or gone quiet. Not one press release had been issued in over a year. Still, in the background, quiet unease persisted. Former partners reported strange phone calls, dead air, clicks, or distorted breathing. A journalist researching Rourke's case received an unmarked envelope containing only a copy of an old Department of Justice memo with half the text blacked out, and the words "dagger" was real circled in red ink. But no one could verify its source. Rourke's name faded from headlines, but in certain federal circles, it still caused tension when whispered. The deeper anyone looked, the clearer one thing became. Rourke hadn't just gone missing. He had touched something dangerous. It had been over 4 years since Agent Daniel Rourke's sudden disappearance, and his case had all but been buried, until, without warning, a cryptic envelope arrived at a small, rarely used FBI drop box in Fairfax County, Virginia. In early December 1991, it was an unremarkable manila envelope. No return address, no fingerprints, no postage, meaning it had been delivered by hand. Inside was a single sheet of cheap, lined paper, the ink slightly smudged, bearing only a few haunting words. Unit 12, Locker 8. He told the truth. Alongside it was something no one expected to see again: Rourke's original FBI badge. Aged but unmistakable, the number still etched beneath the bureau's crest. The envelope caused instant chaos. The badge had been declared missing since the day Rourke vanished, and it had never turned up in any search. That it was now in federal hands, suddenly, and with no warning, meant one thing: someone out there had been holding on to it for years. The handwriting on the note was tested, scanned, and examined under every forensic tool available. The results were frustratingly vague: male, late 30s to early 50s, likely left-handed, but no matches in the database. Whoever had written the message had gone to great lengths to remain invisible. A team was dispatched to investigate the storage facility listed in the tip. It was an aging, weather-beaten self-storage lot on the edge of Pasadena, Maryland, barely staffed and half forgotten. Unit 12, Locker 8 inches was a narrow roll-up unit, dusty and unremarkable on the outside. The manager confirmed the locker had been prepaid in cash every 6 months since early 1988, just months after Rourke vanished. No one had ever visited during the day, he claimed, but occasionally, motion sensors caught movement late at night. Surveillance footage was non-existent. The cameras had been broken for years, and no one had bothered to replace them. When federal agents broke the lock, they didn't know what to expect, but they certainly weren't prepared for what they found. The inside of Locker 8 was cold and strangely odorless. Along the walls were stacked banker boxes, each labeled with cryptic initials and dates. At the center sat a large commercial freezer, sealed shut with rusting latches and duct tape. Inside the boxes were handwritten notes, audio tapes, newspaper clippings, and dozens of undeveloped film rolls, most dated between 1983 and 1987. The tapes were labeled with cryptic phrases like sparrowcomb, jajar, and dagar. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Whoever had placed these here wasn't just hiding secrets, they were curating them. But the most chilling discovery was inside that freezer. When agents finally pried it open, the contents revealed a human form, skeletal remains, wrapped carefully in a black tarp, secured with zip ties, and a faded bureau issue, evidence tag, marked property of D. Rourke. Preliminary dental analysis on-site suggested what the agents had feared. The remains matched Daniel Rourke's profile. But questions immediately arose. If this was Rourke, who had stored his own body here, and why preserve it so carefully, in cold storage, only to anonymously deliver the location years later? The scene was as silent as it was horrifying, and the deeper they looked into the locker, the more twisted and deliberate the truth seemed to become. The locker had already shaken. Investigators with the discovery of human remains believed to be Agent Daniel Rourke, but what truly disturbed them wasn't just the body, it was everything else. Rows of neatly organized boxes lined the narrow metal walls, each labeled with handwritten codes, acronyms, and strange symbols no one immediately recognized. The air inside was dry, almost stale, as if the unit hadn't been opened in years. Yet there was no dust on the tapes or folders. Someone had been inside recently, maintaining it, checking it, curating it like a twisted museum of evidence no one was ever supposed to find. One box in particular, marked op-dagger unedited, held a series of audio cassettes recorded covertly. When agents played the first tape back at the lab, what they heard sent chills down their spines. The muffled recording captured a conversation between two men in a noisy restaurant. One was clearly Agent Rourke. The other voice remains unidentified to this day. In the recording, Rourke references high-level federal names, judges, prosecutors, and senior FBI personnel, speaking openly about backdoor deals with criminal syndicates, falsified convictions, and what he chillingly referred to as institutional betrayal. He said on tape, "The system isn't broken, it's rigged." Behind the boxes, investigators discovered a hidden panel made of plywood, which peeled away to reveal a compartment no larger than a suitcase. Inside were three things: a loaded .38 revolver, a worn leather-bound notebook, and a sealed evidence bag containing an ID badge with the name S.A. Brian Keller, a fellow agent who, according to FBI records, had died in a supposed accident. In 1984, that finding sent immediate shockwaves through the Bureau. If Keller's badge had been in Rourke's possession, then what really happened to him? More disturbingly, what had Rourke discovered that linked them together? Photographs were also found, many of which had never been seen before. Grainy, black-and-white surveillance-style images showing shadowy meetings between government officials and known cartel figures in parking garages, hotel lobbies, and what appeared to be the back rooms of federal courthouses. One image in particular stood out: a man with his face half turned from the camera, meeting with someone in a dark overcoat. The man's features resembled a sitting federal judge, still active in 1991. When questioned later, the judge denied ever knowing Rourke and claimed the image was doctored. The original film negative, however, told a different story. In the far corner of the unit, resting beneath a tarp and behind stacked crates, agents found what initially looked like a filing cabinet. But inside it were recorded interviews, all conducted by Rourke himself. He had been building a case off the grid against something much larger than just criminal networks. He was exposing a network within the network: rogue agents, political figures, and even justice officials who were allegedly steering investigations, burying evidence, and protecting high-value criminals for profit and power. But before he could go public, something or someone stopped him. The evidence in the locker was overwhelming. And yet, pieces were still missing, and perhaps intentionally so. Back at the Bureau's private lab facility, a team of analysts worked around the clock to catalog and review the dozens of audio tapes pulled from storage locker 8. Most were unmarked or labeled with cryptic initials, like MJ Confession, Trial Bypass, or simply Red Room. Despite their age, the tapes played clearly. The recordings weren't haphazard or accidental, they were methodical. Rourke had been documenting a web of corruption that reached deep inside the justice system, one tape at a time. Many conversations were clearly recorded without consent, often in echoey parking garages, cheap diners, or the backseats of cars. The audio painted a chilling picture: politicians discussing fabricated testimony, federal agents trading case files for money, and prosecutors agreeing to bury evidence in exchange for career advancement. One particularly disturbing tape, labeled Sparrow 6A, featured the voice of a woman, nervous and whispering, recounting how she was paid to lie on the stand in a high-profile murder trial. She referenced a man in a gray suit who met her at a government building late at night and handed her a sealed envelope containing photos of her children. It wasn't about justice, she whispered on the tape. It was about leverage. When analysts checked the trial she described, the official court transcripts were heavily redacted. The man she testified against had been sentenced to life in prison. Rourke had filed it under the name of a judge he believed was compromised. In tape after tape, Rourke could be heard growing more frantic, more isolated. He frequently spoke into the recorder late at night, leaving voice memos not just for evidence, but almost like messages for someone he feared wouldn't ever find him. "They know I'm onto them," he muttered in one log. "They know I'm listening." In another, he questions whether he can even trust his own partner. And in one haunting voice note, dated just 5 days before his disappearance, he said, "If you're hearing this, I didn't run. I didn't disappear. I was taken." His voice shook, not from fear, but from the weight of truth too heavy to carry alone. Among the tapes, One cassette stood out worn down, the label peeled off, with only a single word carved into its side. The contents of this tape were never made public, even to most within the Bureau. Sources say it featured Rourke confronting someone, possibly another agent, about crossing a line that can't be uncrossed. Gunshots are heard, then silence. Some say it was staged. Others believe it captured his final moments. But before agents could analyze the audio fully, the tape was taken by an unnamed internal division of the Bureau. It was logged as classified evidence and has never resurfaced. Behind the tapes lay something even more disturbing: a journal Rourke had kept, written in a blend of shorthand codes and rambling paranoia. Pages referenced Project Room Zero, ghost units, and non-official cover operations embedded within DOJ leadership. There were diagrams hand-drawn linking federal agents to criminal cartels, judges to corporate interests, and something ominously referred to as Black Cross. None of these names appeared in any official registry, but the level of detail was unnerving. It wasn't just a conspiracy board. It was a blueprint. A blueprint for something still active, still hidden, and possibly still watching. Within days of the storage unit discovery making its way through official FBI channels, the entire investigation took a sudden and dramatic shift. Files were pulled from desks. Case logs vanished from the internal database. The forensic lab team originally tasked with analyzing the tapes and bones were reassigned overnight, with one technician reportedly placed on extended medical leave. No history of illness. The lead agent on the case, Special Agent Lena Markovich, filed a request for further field analysis of Rourke's findings and was met with a formal reprimand. Less than a week later, she was removed from the case entirely. Her internal email access was shut down, and she was transferred to a field office in Anchorage, Alaska. With no warning. What troubled those remaining was how fast everything was buried. Reports were sealed. Evidence was boxed and marked confidential, executive access only. Requests to revisit the storage unit were denied, citing a classified security protocol. Even more unnerving was the sudden presence of a little-known division within the Bureau, identified only by the initials SIU Special Investigations Unit. No one seemed to know where they came from, who they answered to, or what their jurisdiction really was. They operated without badges, rarely spoke, and when they arrived, entire sections of the Bureau went quiet. One junior agent referred to them as the janitors, not because they cleaned up crime, but because they made evidence disappear. Meanwhile, several names mentioned in Rourke's tapes, federal judges, prosecutors, and internal officials, began to step down from their positions, one by one. Some cited family reasons. Others blamed health concerns. One simply vanished from public view altogether. Reporters who attempted to probe further into the resignations faced sudden legal pushback. A seasoned investigative journalist, named Tommy Lawrence, who had begun connecting the dots between the resignations and the Rourke case, was found dead in his apartment of an alleged heart attack, though his family insisted he was in perfect health. His laptop and notebooks were taken by federal agents before local law enforcement even arrived on the scene. Whistleblowers inside the Bureau began to go dark. One anonymous agent who had initially leaked details of the locker discovery to a private journalist posted a final cryptic message on a secure forum. "They know who accessed the tapes. I'm going dark. Don't trust HQ." That user account was deleted less than 30 minutes later. Several online threads attempting to dissect the contents of Rourke's journal were scrubbed clean. Videos summarizing the tapes were taken down by court order, citing national security risks. The name Daniel Rourke slowly disappeared from official record systems, and just like that, the man who had uncovered a vast, invisible rot at the heart of federal law enforcement was erased again. But perhaps the most disturbing element wasn't what was taken away, was what was left behind. Certain pieces of evidence, especially some of the tapes and handwritten notes, were allowed to remain intact but discredited. Select journalists were briefed off the record that the entire locker discovery was part of an elaborate hoax, a fabrication, created by a mentally unstable ex-agent obsessed with conspiracies. The FBI released no official statement, no press conference, no formal acknowledgement. And yet, somewhere inside the Bureau's vaults, behind triple-locked doors and access-restricted floors, the truth still sat in silence, boxed, logged, and locked away from the world as agents continued to sift through the contents of Storage Locker 8. One final discovery slipped through almost by accident. A technician tasked with cataloging the remaining items noticed that one of the banker boxes, labeled simply miscellaneous A, had a false bottom. It was a thin wooden layer, glued into place, designed to look like the real floor of the box. It only came loose because the tape had worn away slightly with age. Beneath it, lying completely flat, was a single Polaroid photo geo-alloying, at the edges, grainy from time. What it depicted would haunt every agent who saw it. The photo showed a man tied to a chair, arms bound tightly behind his back, his mouth gagged, his face half in shadow. But what made the image unforgettable was the look in his eyes, wide open, filled with terror, as if he knew exactly what was coming. Based on facial analysis, the man was conclusively identified as Daniel Rourke, still alive when the photo was taken. The setting appeared to be a small concrete room with no windows, possibly underground. Behind him on the wall, barely visible, in the low light, was a spray-painted symbol, a crude black cross intersecting a circle. No one recognized it from any official database. On the back of the photo was a handwritten message in red ink. Jagged and slanted, as if written in haste or fury, it read, "He warned you." There was no signature, no date, no fingerprints. The ink wasn't consistent with anything found elsewhere in the locker. What disturbed investigators even more was that the handwriting didn't match Rourke's or anyone else linked to the case. It was completely foreign. When handwriting analysts compared it to known samples, they suggested it bore resemblance to older documents from the 1970s, documents tied to other unexplained federal disappearances that had also gone cold. The discovery of the photo threw the team into chaos. The implications were staggering. If Rourke was alive at least temporarily after his disappearance, then who held him? Why stage his death? And who took the photo, only to hide it so deliberately and send investigators chasing shadows for 4 years? But just as suddenly as this lead appeared, it was sealed away. The photo was classified as non-circulating evidence, not to be shared outside the Bureau. Only a few agents were ever granted access to it, and each one later reported strange tires, surveillance vans outside their homes, unmarked envelopes slid under doors. One retired agent described it as a curse. The moment you look into Rourke's eyes, you're already part of it. After that, nothing else was found. The locker was emptied, swept, and secured by federal order. But even years later, whispers of the case continued to surface. Mentions of the man in the chair, of the red ink message, of the black cross symbol carved in other, unrelated crime scenes across the country. Nothing ever publicly linked to Rourke. Nothing officially confirmed. But those who knew, those who saw, couldn't forget. Somewhere out there, the truth lingered just beneath the surface. Buried under layers of silence, secrets, and sealed vaults, and every so often, someone new would stumble too close, only to vanish into the same darkness that took Daniel Rourke. So what really happened to Agent Daniel Rourke? Did he get too close to a truth no one was ever meant to uncover? Was he silenced by the very system he swore to protect? Or is it possible he left behind these breadcrumbs on purpose, knowing someone, someday, would follow the trail? The files were sealed. The voices were buried. The story, erased from public memory. But the evidence, it still exists. In locked drawers, hidden archives, whispered rumors, and maybe even right in front of us, because sometimes, justice isn't about what's proven, it's about what's protected. And the deeper you look, the more the silence starts to make sense. This wasn't just a disappearance, it was a warning.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.